For some background on this story, I'm a 25-year-old female. About 2 months ago, I went to visit one of my old friends from high school that I hadn't seen in quite a long time. I was in town for about a week and staying in a hotel that was about 10 minutes away. At about midnight, I called an Uber to go back to my hotel. I went outside and waited by the side of the road. It was a fairly populated area, and my friend came outside to talk to me as I waited. We chatted a little bit longer, until she said that my Uber ride was there, and pointed at a car pulling up. A car was on the side of the road, parked in front of us. So I hugged my friend goodbye and got into the back seat. The driver was a man about 30 years old. He said hi to me in a very friendly voice and smiled. Then he said, "Where are you going again?" I got really confused. I told him my hotel. And then he started nodding his head and said that he got it. Then he saw my phone and got really excited about how I had the latest iPhone. He said he was planning on getting one himself. I had just gotten it about a month prior, and I really liked it. He asked if he could take a quick look at it. I handed it to him, and he examined it. Then he began driving with one hand and looking at it with the other. This was a little bit strange to me, but he seemed nice, so I didn't say anything. But then he just kept driving with my phone in his hand. It started to feel really awkward. I asked him what he thought of the phone, hoping he would give it back to me. He just said that he liked it. But he just kept driving and holding on to it as well. Finally, I said to him, "You can give me my phone back now." He laughed a little and said, "I'll give it back to you in a minute. What are you worried about?" I just didn't understand what he was doing, and it seemed pretty odd to me. Then he pulled off the main road onto a much quieter one. I didn't really know the city all that well, because I wasn't from around there. But I just started getting a bad feeling. We drove in silence for about another minute. Then I leaned up and said to him that I needed my phone, because I actually had to make a call. But this time he didn't laugh or smile. And he didn't even answer me at all. He just kept driving and held the phone close to him. Then he pulled the car onto another road. That was even quieter. He drove a little ways and then pulled the car over to the side of the road. The bad feeling that I had got even worse. I asked him why he was stopping again. He didn't answer me. With my phone still tightly in his hand, he turned around and looked at me. Then he locked the doors from the front and smiled at me. In a terrible way. I saw him start to crawl into the back seat with me. All I could say was no. His smile got bigger as he approached. Then he reached out for me. I backed against the end of my seat and kicked at him to defend myself. I got a few good kicks on him before he started to grab the end of my legs. I was struggling as much as I could, but he was beginning to overpower me. I kept trying to fight as best as I could. Just then my phone started to ring, which was still in his hand. It startled him momentarily. In that split second, I kicked my legs back towards me, and then forward as hard as I could. I was able to kick him in the head. It wasn't the hardest kick, but it was enough to knock him to the other side of the seat. When he did, I reached for the door to unlock it, and then opened the door. I got out and ran off down the street. I heard the car door open, so I ran into the grass on the side of the road. Instead, there were a few trees and a little hill. I ran up that hill and then kept running. Eventually, I made it to a busier street that had a gas station on it. I looked behind me, and the man was not chasing me. So I ran inside the gas station and asked them to call the police. I waited there until they came. When the police arrived, we went back to the scene to find my iPhone smashed on the side of the road. It looked like it had been ran over by a car, and the screen was destroyed. It turns out the man wasn't even my Uber driver. He had just seen me on the side of the road and pretended to be my driver. When my friend realized I had gotten in the wrong car, she tried texting me, and when I didn't reply, she called me. Her call may have saved me that night. About 3 or 4 years ago, I was working really hard to try to save money. I would work my job during the day, and then drive Uber at night. Between the two, I would work sometimes up to 17 hours in a day. But I was saving my money really well. One night when I was about to go home, I decided to give one last ride. I picked up an older man. From the minute he got into my car, he just seemed on. I'm not exactly sure why, but he just seemed a little strange. He was wearing a weird, almost old-fashioned looking outfit. And when I told him hello, it was a good 5 seconds before he responded and said hello back to me. The location he was going to was also very odd. It wasn't a building or location. It just looked like the side of a road. I asked the man that was correct. He looked at me with this strange look and then told me, yes. I drove off and tried to make a little small talk with him, even though I was dead tired. I thought maybe it might help keep me awake. I asked the man if he was from around here. He just said yes. I asked him how his day was, but he didn't answer me. I thought whatever and kept driving. I was just really happy that this was my last ride in the night. Finally, we arrived in his location, which was, in fact, just the side of the road with a little woods. I stopped the car and asked him if this is where he was going. He didn't answer me, and this dad just got out. I tried to watch to see where he was going, but then I couldn't see him. It was pretty dark, but I was sure I would be able to see him walking. He just seemed to vanish into the woods. I was so confused. Then I looked over at my Uber app to complete the ride. But when I looked at my phone, the Uber app was closed. I opened it back up to see no history at all. of the ride that I had just gave. I just drove home after that and went straight to bed. I'm not sure if I was so sleepy that I was imagining things or what, but I have no explanation of what happened to this day. This story happened roughly 1 year ago. I was at a friend's apartment for his birthday, with a bunch of people. I would say there was a good 10 to 15 people there. When it started getting late, a handful of us started calling Ubers. I got one, and when it arrived, I got in. The driver said hi, and I said hi as well. I was pretty tired, so I was hoping he wouldn't talk much, and I could just go home and sleep. He then turned to me and said that I was lucky, because I was his last ride of the night, and then he was going home. I smiled and said cool and then put in my headphones. The drive lasted roughly 15 minutes. And finally we got back to my apartment building. It was an apartment building that had 3 levels, with the first one being on the ground, and each one on the first level opened directly to outside. I lived on the first floor. I told him thanks, and then I got out. I walked to my door and went inside. I remember when I went inside, I noticed he didn't drive away yet, but I didn't really think anything of it. That is, until after I changed and brushed my teeth, and then went back into my living room to turn off the lights. I saw he was still sitting there. I thought maybe his car broke or something, but I couldn't figure it out. I thought that was pretty unlikely. I didn't really feel comfortable going to sleep, with him still sitting there. I squinted my eyes to take a closer look. I couldn't tell if he was even still in the car. I decided to step outside, to get a better look of his car. I opened my door, and walked out to the little porch area. As soon as I took a couple of steps, I heard movement to my left. I looked and saw the man, crouched down at the side of my apartment, getting up and running away. I yelled at him that I was calling the police, and then ran back into my place and did so. A couple seconds later, I looked and saw his car speeding away. The police arrived a few minutes later, but he was long gone. That was my craziest experience with Uber.